Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, coming to you today from Sweden. Just arrived here yesterday to begin our European clinic tour here for the next month. So looking forward to that and should be posting some fun things from that here very soon. So starting out here with Maren and Emmy. I met these two at the clinic in Ithaca, New York a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago and work with them, and she's doing a really good job here and making a lot of good forward progress with this horse. This is a very big horse, and as you can see, Maren is not huge. You're doing a really good job with this horse. Very often, when you're a little bit short and you have a very enormous horse like you have, it can be a little difficult to do this work in hand. But you're certainly doing a good job with it. The one thing I would just like to say is I just like to see you getting the horse to move over a little more, that is away from your leg, which is the whip in this case. She's kind of going around you and you're walking, and it's not a bad thing, and the horse is starting to stretch pretty nicely in the shambo, and so that's really quite good. But the next step with this would be to do a little more lateral work with the horse, so you get the horse to step over a little more rather than just going in a straight line, which would help you develop the horse and get control of the speed. But you're doing a very good job with this, and as I said, it can be difficult when you're a little on the short side and you have a very big horse to do this. So she gets a little confused here, and that's where you want to get a little further behind the eye, which you do straighten yourself out right there, and that's really good. And now we get a little more sidewards movement. She's a little confused about what it is that you want here. There you go, but you get it back in gear again. She starts to move her. So that's what I'm talking about. Now what we have to do, though, when we get this asking for a little bit more sideways movement, is just be sure that we're not taking the neck out of the line. That's the hard part of doing this, and that's the importance of the outside rein. Because it's the outside rein. We use very little inside rein when we're doing this with horses. It's the idea is that this is the first time that we present the horse with the idea of the inside leg to the outside rein, which is what we're doing here, is teaching the horse to move into but yet stand up to the outside rein and not run through it. So you're doing a really good job here, and you're getting a little more lateral work. We just have to be careful and you're not bending the neck so much, so that's good. So you're having moments throughout this where you're really getting to the place that you want to be. That's mostly when you're in the walk at this moment, but you're doing a good job. The trot work, it's coming along. Always remembering whenever the horse gets too stiff and just feel like you can't get it, as you do here, just come back to the walk and reestablish it in the walk. And if you get the horse right in the walk long enough, before long, you'll be able to get it right in the trot and then the canter as well. So good job here of just walking along with the horse, getting a little bit of stretch, but once again, I'd like to see a little more of a leg yield, which will help you to get the horse to step under. Remember, when the horse steps under the body, that helps us to push the back up. Of course, steps under, and of course, that's to push up through that leg, which helps us to push the back up into position and helps the horse get the idea of what it is that we want. So once again, I'd just like to see a little more lateral work in this, in your work in hand. But other than that, it's really quite good. And once again, for someone of your size, working a horse of this size, you're doing a very good job of just not letting the horse walk over the top of you. So even when you had that difficulty there, you got a little behind the eye and you got the horse more into the correct position. So here's where we talk about just getting the horse to move out away from you. And once you get the horse doing a little more of the lateral work from the ground, from your work in hand, you're going to find it's going to be easier to get the horse to get away from you on the lunge line here, like as you do, because that's really kind of the point of that work, some of it anyway. But this has improved really quite a bit since I saw you last time. I think you're doing a very good job with everything I'm seeing here, and I'm seeing the horse becoming better and better all the time. So good work. Now, I would like to see a little more time spent in the walk, if you can, before you take the horse off in the trot, just so the horse really gets stretching. That's really the key to all this, is just being sure that before you go up in the gait, that is, before you increase the tempo or go to the next gait, that you get the one before it right. Now, sometimes with horses that just won't walk, we have to let them, trot a little bit, little reverse psychology. So rather than trying to hold the horse back, which is the basic premise of classical dressage, is we don't try to force the horse into doing anything. We try to find a way of communicating to it in its language. So once again, when the horse just starts taking off with you, just sometimes we have to push them a little bit more. And we know with this horse, it was very sensitive about the whip. And the horse, when I first met her, she wouldn't let you point the whip at her, or she'd take off running like a lunatic. And that's something we always have to get a horse over. We can't just let them bully us with that and be afraid to just keep the whip up there. And it takes a few minutes longer right in the beginning. That's okay. But as you are already experienced, the horse will get used to the whip and will stop running away from it when you stop backing off. But if every time the horse starts to run, you turn the whip back the other way, the horse is basically controlling you and getting you to do what it wants to do. So you're doing a good job of working with that, and you've made a lot of progress here so far in terms of getting the horse to accept the idea that you've got your whip pointed towards her. And I think the horse is really not running that badly in terms of everything that I see here. So I like how you trotted, then you came back to the walk, and that's just the thing to do. So you're not, they're not always thinking, well, if I could just trot, I could get out of doing anything, or if I could just canter and run away. My father taught me at a very young age, the only way you cure a horse from running away is simply ride it till it doesn't want to run away anymore, and then make it canter a little further, and pretty soon it won't want to run away with you. A little reverse psychology, in other words. So what a good trainer does is take those moments that, the horse is trying to be a little disobedient, instead of trying to force the horse, for instance, to walk, but just send them on the trot a little bit. And pretty soon they'll want to come back. Because horses are, unless they are just super hyper fit, and even those are, essentially are looking for a way out of what is being asked them to do. Of course, the beauty, once again, of the classical system is once we teach a horse how to move correctly, it's happy to do so because it feels comfortable in the work, and that's why this system eliminates so much of the difficulty that we see people having with riding, that is, of course, of being so resistive to what they're doing and having to fight with them all the time. So while, any horse you may have to have, as Nuno Oliveira used to say, once in a while a horse has to have a strong lesson, especially horses that have been spoiled and learned very bad habits. But, that should be a one-time thing, not an everyday thing. So when you see people who are just fighting with horses day after day after day after day, it's a pretty indication of, what the horse thinks of them and how the horse has accepted the work. Horses can be very difficult, but they should always be working towards being less difficult. If they're not, and the horse is becoming more difficult through your training, or you're having to fight day after day, it should tell you that you're on the wrong track. And the wrong track is usually asking the horse to do things in the wrong way, so the horse is in the wrong frame, so it can't do what you're asking it to do physically. Most horses are pretty willing to do what we ask them to do, as long as it's within the frame of what they can do. So coming back here to this walk now, this is much better. And so you had to go fast and slow a couple of times, but now you've come back to a pretty good walk, and she's starting to stretch. It could be a little more consistent, but you start to get a little bit longer frame in the horse, like right there, she starts to stretch down. And of course, as with all horses, notice that as the horse begins to stretch down, the hind legs will start to look a little better. They'll start to move more actively and in rhythm. Of course, always remembering when we talk about rhythm, we're talking about the two ends of the horse being in rhythm, not the general speed that the horse goes. When you see these horses, they look like they're going at a steady rhythm around the ring, but they look like they're on square wheels, so to speak, like the wheels are about to fly off. Or somehow you look at them, some people can't figure out, well, what's wrong? It doesn't look right, but really what it is, horses you never get that really sense of, a solemnness and a steady artistic sense of what the horse is doing until you see that perfect rhythm between the front and back end. When you watch so many of these horses today that have been forced into these phony positions in dressage, and you look at them, they look like they're on square wheels, what they call leg movers. But they're only leg movers because people are trying to move that way. Now here you're getting a good stretch, but there you want to just ask for a little more activity than that to send the horse on. You see how the horse is kind of making a little bit of a square there at times, not really going around a circle. It's still a little counter flex to the outside and not really stretching all the way down. And once again, when a horse cannot bend unless it lifts its back. So what you'll see is as your horses start to stretch down, you'll see all this counter flexion go away all by itself. You don't have to work on that. You have to work on getting the horse over its back, and that solves the problem, as it does in so many other types of problems that we have with horses. Better stretch here in the walk once you come back to it. But just needs to be a little more active once again there than it is here. We'd like to swing it, get to see those legs swinging in a little more consistent rhythm. And of course stretching a little bit deeper. But you have moments in all of this where you're really getting there. So just know that, horses are never just perfect in a day. And ones that have been going around, rather hollow for their whole lives have never really developed correctly. In the beginning, it can take a little time for them to readjust. For instance, if horses have always been helt in their hands, we start riding them a little looser rein, they start looking at things. Well, what's going on here? Well, it's just because the horse, for the first time in his life, somebody's giving it a little slack in the reins, so it sometimes can take a little time to get over that hump of the horse beginning to go, okay, even though I feel my freedom, I can still work consistently in the reins. So with that lunging work there, just keep working for that. And once again, I think if you work that work in hand and get the horse doing a little more lateral work in your work in hand, that will help you before you do your lunging. And anytime, if you have a horse that is that kind of hyper horse that just wants to run around you and will run around you. I mean, I've seen horses that you could literally lunge for 2 hours and they'd continue to run around you. But you have to stop with that case and just go back to the work in hand. That's how we help them. So we don't end up with a horse that's hyper fit. So if I can't get a horse to stretch into the contact really within a few minutes on the lunge line, I'm going to stop and go and do a little work in hand and get the horse beginning to understand, get the horse stretching in hand first, and then the horse will understand what I want. But this walk is looking better here once that you're mounted, and once again we can see that mostly the horse gets a little tight in the lower part of the neck at times and isn't all the way stretched here, but it's pretty pleasant and the rhythm is coming pretty nicely, and there are moments here where you really get the horse all the way out there, which I, of course, will point out as we get to those moments. But this walk is really pretty good, other than just needs to be a little bit longer so it can be a little more consistent. And that's why we still lose the rhythm so much. You start to make a turn or something, because the horse isn't over its back enough to let it flow through that turn, and kind of has to slow down and speed up, that sort of thing, as you go around the turn. So as you get the horse deeper and deeper, and once again, you keep the turns and the exercise that you do within the scope of what the horse can actually do, then we'll see a rhythm beginning to really develop. And once again, when I say rhythm, I'm talking about the rhythm between the two ends of the horse, the perfect rhythm. So a lot of these horses that we see helt in the bridle, they start looking like they're on square wheels. We looked at one recently that someone was considering buying, and we watched it over a little bit of time and saw how, we saw the horse as a 3-year-old, and by 5-year-old it was totally broken over and beginning to develop kissing spine. So the horse was being very helt in the neck. And yes, it kind of had this phony frame looking to it, but what we see is that the hind leg is swinging differently than the front leg, because the neck, when you cram the neck back against the shoulders, it makes the horse can't swing the shoulders. So what it has to do is starts making it lift the knees up, but the hind legs are swinging through in a totally different way, or not swinging through at all. And of course, that's why we see, once again, this horse that at 3 looked pretty good, and by 5 was starting to get kissing spine, because they're going for all this action in the front legs. It's the back legs, folks, that are important. Whatever happens in front are just a symptom of whatever's going on through the horse's back and whether it can actually connect or not. Pretty good rhythm here, and getting a little bit lower in the stretch. And the beauty of the walk is you can do a lot of it. So spend a lot of time at this level really working this out. As I said, as Nuno used to say, this is where we explain everything to the horse. But it's also where the rider gets the chance to learn the skill of communication without everything coming so fast at them that they just can't deal with it. I mean, you can run around on a hollow horse for hours and hours and hours, and if you've never felt it in the walk, it's going to be very difficult to get that to happen. But if you get the walk first, everything must always be in the order of the gaits. That is how we progress the horse in training. Get the walk first, and then the trot work will get better and better. So I would never get out of a walk with my horse until I could get it all the way stretched into a good walk over the horse's back, and really stretching the whole length of the back. And then, and only then, would I go to the trot work. So don't think that you need to do 3 gaits a day. If you're getting on and the only real work that you can do really correctly is the walk work, just do the walk. Try the trot a little bit, just like we do with the canter. If you have a horse with a bad canter, don't canter it, because you'll only make the horse lame. Once again, the faster we go on a horse, the more difficult it is on the horse's body to keep doing what we're asking it to do. But you can spend plenty of time walking. It's a very low impact gait. It's kind of what happened with people back in the 80s when everybody started doing this aerobic exercise. Well, if you meet any of those old aerobic trainers today, you'll find that most of them are having knee and hip replacements, because they weren't doing the exercise in a way. Yes, they were getting this massive workout and getting very cut in their bodies, so to speak, but at a terrible cost to their joints. And that's what we must not do to horses. That's why these horses are all having to be injected today at such a low age, and that people have come to think that injections are something you do as maintenance, which is a totally ridiculous idea. I mean, every time you invade that joint with a needle, you're taking a great deal of choice, and if you're chance there of permanent injury to the horse. And this is okay. It's very normal. I tell people all the time, don't worry if the horse breaks into a trot a little bit. That's okay. When you're trying to get it to swing through, that's very normal as the horse is trying to understand what we want. Okay, it's trying to go, well, what is it you want? I'll try going to a trot and just say no, just very quietly without brutalizing the horse about it. And you come back to the walk and start again. Now, this is not a bad walk. It's just not quite stretched all the way there yet, though you have moments when it is. So same thing when we get to the trot here. It's not a terrible trot. I mean, the horse isn't too shortened back in the neck, but it's not quite lengthening the whole length of its neck. Which is something else that people need to realize. I see people that talk to me and, they think they're doing this because they're not pulling the neck in. Well, that's only the first part. Yes, they're letting the neck be out in front of them, but they're not getting the horse to work over its back. So it's not enough just not to pull the neck in. It's enough we have to get the horse working over its back. So horses will develop, in other words, if you never got the horse stretching more than this but left the neck out, the horse will kind of develop, but in a flat kind of way, where they become kind of stable over the back, but they're not really working over their entire back. So we see all that will show itself in downward transitions and lack of collection, and we see so few horses today that are actually collected. I ask dressage trainers all the time if they can describe collection for me, and I am amazed at how many people that supposedly ride at the upper levels that really cannot describe collection. Remember, once the horse is working over its back, collection is simply the degree to which the horse keeps the hind legs lowered, lowers the three joints of the hind legs so that it can thrust the front end off of the ground. So collection is a thrust of the entire forehand up into the air. It's not bracing the horse's neck back and shortening the gait so that the knees come up. That's just bad riding, and it's just, not much different than riding a saddlebred or a Tennessee Walker, really, which is the sad thing that we've seen dressage turn into. I mean, the very idea that riders today think, we see this all the time, at least in California, where people have ridden for 6 months and they're already dreaming of Grand Prix and buying horses that they think are made Grand Prix horses, trying to show them. And in fact, they're not even doing dressage. I mean, we need to be giving out a lot more zeros in dressage than we should. And a horse not working over its back is not in a working trot. So it should score a 0 on the test, not a 1, 2, 3, or 4, because it isn't sufficient at all. It isn't doing the exercise. Now this is pretty good here. And you see how the neck got a little bit longer, and all of a sudden the horse doesn't look so much like it's on a forehand, like it's swinging through. And once again, that's what I tell people all the time. The neck has very little to do with whether the horse is on the forehand or not. It's whether the horse swings through and lifts through the back. For instance, a horse we looked at a couple of days ago, that at 3 years old, it was actually more off the forehand than it was as a 5-year-old, where it was pulled together into a phony frame, where its legs were very active, but it showed absolutely no ability to thrust up into the back. Remember, when the back is hollow, the horse cannot complete the stride through the back, so it becomes very truncated, and that's how we get horses to move the knees up and down in front, while the hind legs are literally just sort of trotting along behind. So this is a pretty good trot here. It was a little better a moment ago, and the neck was a little bit longer. So you've certainly made some progress here. We can still see how the underside of the neck is still a little bit on the tight side, a little bit U-necked, still pulling a little bit with the shoulders. But when you get it out there, as it was a minute ago, and as it gets here in a few minutes, it starts to look a little better. Like right there, it even starts to look a little better, though the neck still needs to be longer. Remember, if we never get the horse to release all the way down, the horse is never going to develop correctly. Always remembering that it takes about 2 years from the beginning of training for a horse to go through the process of its withers pulling up through the shoulders so that it develops an uphill stance, and the horse will look very uphill. Today we breed horses to look uphill, and then people ride them until the wheels fall off because they kind of look like they're supposed to look because they're built that way. But there's not a horse in the world if it can flex its hocks, it can get off of its forehand eventually if we develop the top line enough. That is, it can develop enough thrust to push the forehand up into the air, and that's what real collection is. The whole forehand is lifted, and the hindquarters are lowered, which is what gives the horses, that uphill kind of look, the real uphill kind of look, instead of just a horse that's bred that way going around the ring. We see so many horses at Grand Prix today getting 80s and 90% scores who are not collected at all, who are not in rhythm. Their hind and front legs are not even working together at all. You can clearly see it if you know what you're looking at. Sadly, it's become much more, dressage has become much closer to saddlebred riding than it's ever been before. And at least the saddlebred people, as some of you have heard me say before, at least they don't try to do lateral work with their horses because they know they can't do it. But unfortunately, people on hollow dressage horses, I looked at one of the top trainers in America the other day riding a test that he got an 84% on, and the horse is literally popping its front knees one with the other when it tries to do a half pass because it's so hollow it can't cross its legs over. Yet the horse scored an 84%. So how does that happen, tell me? So we must begin to educate ourselves and educate the judges, and we must all, talk about these things and try to get this sport back to being a real sport again, instead of just a silly horse show class like so many of the others that really aren't sports. They're just displaying horses in one way or another in some kind of phony frame. This looks a little better here. Now, I'd still like to see the stretch get a little bit deeper, but you're getting pretty good activity here, and the horse has gotten a little softer on the other side of the neck here. We see as it comes around here, it's a little softer there, and we see the top line beginning to light up. That is the top part of the neck. You can clearly see that. But when you see horses that are forced into the reins, for instance, horses that are rolkered, you'll see that while the neck is pulled in, you'll see the underside of the neck is still very, very tense. As when you put side reins on, or draw reins on horses and ride them, what I've noticed is as soon as you take the draw reins off, the head just goes straight back in the air because the horse has never been really working over its back. So a pretty good active trot here, just not quite as deep as we ultimately want it to go, but is an improving yes. Like right there, we see it starts to stretch. And once again, every time we see the horse get a little longer and deeper, watch how much deeper it tracks under the body, which is the only way the horse can ever develop real thrust. But the back must be round in order for that thrust to complete itself through the back. If the horse is hollow, that's why we see so many horses in dressage today whose hips are popping up. We see people doing piaffe and passage, and the hips are higher than the withers while they're doing it. Well, that's simply not a piaffe and passage, and it should be counted as a zero. It's not the movement that's actually called for in dressage. But unfortunately, this has been the problem that's started 30 years ago when the USDF started telling judges to judge on a sliding scale, and they gave them so much freedom, and there's nobody overseeing any of this stuff, as there should be, or people who actually know what they're doing, paying attention to what these judges are scoring and how they're going about it. I was shocked. I met somebody who was a scribe at the last WEG who told me that they were scribing for the head judge, who never put a score on the test until the end of the test, when he went and then collected all of the tests from every other rider and saw what they'd marked down and then marked his test so that the horse he wanted to win won. How is that fair? I've never even heard of that going on before. But these are the kind of things that we must get under control in dressage. Good here. This is good. Starting to swing through quite nicely. Still needs to be just a little bit deeper, but we're starting to get a pretty good rhythm. At least the horse doesn't look like it's on square wheels here. We just need to get it just that little bit deeper. Right there, you get a little better, and look how underneath the neck, it gets softer. That's what we're working towards. So that was really pretty good. We're seeing some real improvement in this horse, and once again, I would spend more time on the lunge, on your work in hand, getting the horse doing a little more lateral work, keeping the neck straight. Once again, getting the horse to move a little far more away from you on the lunge line and consistently into the stretch, and same thing in your walk, getting the horse a little deeper in the walk before you go to the other work. But this is all improving very, very well, and it certainly shows a lot of improvement since I saw you last only a few weeks ago in Ithaca, New York. So great job. This is Will Faerber coming to you from Sweden today, where we're looking forward to a great clinic. Now, just in your seat there, I would like to see you straighten up your back just a little bit and don't lean over so much. So great job, Maren. Look forward to seeing you soon and see the next one. Look forward to seeing everybody soon.